Reading from Srimad Bhagawatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 15, text 49. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Kamam Bhavaha Svaganir Nareshu Na Stach Kamam Bhava Svaganir Nirayeshu Na Stach Cheto Livad Yadi Nu Te Palayo Ramita Cheto Livad Yadi Nu Tapalayo Ramita Vachash Cha Nas Tosishivat Yadi Te Nigri Soba Vachas Chanas Tosishvad Yadi Nivik Shoba Poyita Te Gunaganar Yadi Karna Randraha Puryate Gunar Yadi Karna Rugaraha Kamam Bhava Svagranir Nirasheshu Nastach Cheto Livad Yadinu Te Padayo Rameta Vanchas Chanas Tosisvad Yadite Nigrashobaha Puryetate Gunagunair Yadikane Randraha Kamam Bhava Svavaganir Nirayeshu Nastach Cheta Vivad Yadinu Te Padayo Rameta Vachas Chatnas Tosisvad Yadine Nidrika Shobaha Puryatate Gunagunair Yadikane Randraha Others?
Kamam Bhavasva Vrushamir Narayeshi Nasach Sito Livadya Linute Padayo Ramate Vachas Chanas Tulasivadya Te Nugishwa Puryete Gunaguner Yadi Karnaranda
Kamam Bhavasva Vijinaya Nirayeshu Nastach Cheto Livajali Nute Padayo Rameta Vachas Tulasivatyadi Tenkushobha. Puryetate Gunakanayadi Karmarandraha.
Kamam, as much as deserved. Vavaha, birth. Sa, Svaganir, by our own sinful activities. Nira Yeshu, in lower birth and low births. Na, our. Stat, let it be. Chitaha, minds. Alivat, like bees. Yadi, if. Nu, maybe. Te, your. Hariyo, at your lotus feet. Umeta, are engaged. Vacha, words. Cha, and. Na, our. Tosivat, like the tulsi leaves. Yadi, if. Te, your. Angari, at your lotus feet. Shobha, beautified. Pariyeta, are filled. Te, your. Guna ganai, by transcendental qualities. Yadi, if. Karna randa raha, the holes of the ears. Translation. O Lord, we pray that you let us be born in any hellish condition of life, just as long as our hearts and minds are always engaged in the service of your lotus feet. Our words are made beautiful by speaking of your activities, just as tulsi leaves are beautified when offered onto your lotus feet. And as long as your ears are always filled with the chanting of your transcendental qualities. Please repeat. O Lord, we pray that you let us be born in any hellish condition of life, just as long as our hearts and minds are always engaged in your service of your lotus feet. Our words are made beautiful by speaking of your activities, just as tulsi leaves are beautified when offered onto your lotus feet. As long as our ears are always filled with the chanting of your transcendental qualities. Report by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The four sages now offer their humility to the personality of Godhead because of their having been haughty and cursing two other devotees of the Lord, Jai and Vijay, the two doorkeepers who checked them from entering Vaikuntha planet, where certainly offenders, but as Vaishnavas, the four sages should not have cursed them in anger. After the incident, they became conscious they had done wrong by cursing the devotees of the Lord. And they prayed to the Lord that even in the hellish condition of life, their minds might not be distracted from the engagement of service to the lotus feet of Lord Narayan. Those who are devoted to the Lord are not afraid of any condition of life, provided their constant engagement in the service of the Lord. It is said of the Narayan Para, or those who are devotees of Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, na kutaschana bibyati. They are not afraid of entering hellish condition. For since they are engaged in a transcendental loving service to the Lord, heaven or hell is the same for them. In material life, both heaven and hell are one and the same because they are material. In either place, there is no engagement in Lord's service. Therefore, those who are engaged in the service of the Lord see no distinction between heaven and hell. It is only the materialists who prefer one to the other. These 4 devotees prayed to the Lord that although they might go to hell because they had cursed devotees, they might not forget the service of the Lord. The transcendental loving service of the Lord is performed in 3 ways: with the body, with the mind, and with words. Here, the sages pray that their words may be always engaged in glorifying the Supreme Lord. One may speak very nicely with ornamental language, or one may be very expert in controlled grammatical presentation. But if one's words are not engaged in the service of the Lord, they have no flavor and no actual use. The example is given here of tulsi leaves. The tulsi leaf is very useful even from medicinal or antiseptic point of view. It is considered sacred and it is offered to the lotus feet of the Lord. The tulsi leaf has numerous good qualities, but if it were not offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, tulsi could not be much of value or importance. Similarly, one may speak very nicely from a rhetorical or grammatical point of view, which may be very much appreciated by a materialistic audience. But if one's words are not offered to the service of the Lord, they are useless. The holes of the ears are very small and can be filled with any insignificant sound. So, how can they receive as great vibration the glorification of the Lord? The answer is that the holes of the ears are like the sky, as the sky can never be filled up. The quality of air is such that one may go on pouring in vibrations of various kinds, yet it is capable of receiving more and more vibrations. A devotee is not afraid of going to hell if he has the opportunity to hear the glories of the Lord constantly. This is the advantage of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. One may be put in any condition, but God gives him the prerogative. How do you say that? Prerogative?
Prerogative.
Thank you. Prerogative. To chant Hare Krishna in any condition of life. If one goes on chanting, he will never be unhappy. Om Gyantimirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chaksu Militam Etasma Shri Vedama Sri Chaitanya Vistam Shapitam Nilabhutve Swayamukra Mayam Daranti Svabharantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shuddhapada Kamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagitam Sarvagnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Savletam Savadutam Vajansitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Parasa Namadita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Krishna Sindhu Dino Bando Jagapate Gopisha Gopikanta Radha Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vadam Neshri Vishwaban Suti Devi Harinami Hari Pri Vancha Kalpa Chubascha Kripasan Vicha Vitana Bhaviva Vaishnavu Amanamaha. O Lord, we pray that you let us be born in any hellish condition of life, just as long as our hearts and minds are always engaged in service of your lotus feet. Our words are made beautiful by speaking of your activities, just as toast leaves are beautified when offered unto your lotus feet. And as long as our ears are always filled with chanting of your transcendental qualities. So we see here that the 4 Kumars are speaking with Narayan, and they're describing here that, and as Prabhupada uses the word hati, hati meaning a sense of feeling prideful within themselves, and cursing Jai and Vijay. But once they came to understand that they had made this mistake, they actually understood that this is the the right understanding. That even before that they had cursed the two doorkeepers, they came to the understanding of making this offense. And this is the proper understanding for a Vaishnava, that he may make a mistake due to poor choices, but he rectifies himself. This is very important. So we see here that the emphasis here is that there's this fearless quality, that even a devotee that is fixed on Krishna, so to speak, he's not even afraid to go to hell. Heaven and hell doesn't really make a difference, according here, because the devotee just wants to engage in devotional service. And this is the mood, that a devotee doesn't even necessarily want to go back to the spiritual world. He just wants to continue serving Krishna. And if that means that he comes to the material world to please Krishna, then that's what he does. So we shouldn't be attached to wherever we may be. We shouldn't be averse to wherever we may be. We should understand it's the divine plan of Krishna, whatever position we may be in. And sometimes being in difficult situations is actually a great boon, a great benediction. Because it forces one to look more deeper from within than all the externals that may be around. Sometimes we have lots of opulence, lots of nice things. These can be distractions to devotional service. So, but even for a devotee that's fixed up in Krishna consciousness, he's not concerned about any condition. He may have lots of opulences, he may not have no opulences, but his main point is wanting to serve. Is so that only seva can save us. And that if we have this in mind of the hearing, chanting, hearing about the pastimes of the Lord, we can actually make great advancement. And this actually what gives us encouragement. That we understand that the soul is part and parcel. The individual soul is part and parcel of Krishna. And that Krishna, the only real source of happiness, comes from in connecting with Krishna. When the Jivatma, or the living entity, makes his choice or free will to try to enjoy outside of Krishna, we think he may try to enjoy, is where actually suffering comes about. That there's no external situation that can make a person suffer if he understands his spiritual position. That in the material world, as it said here, the material life can be life, and for the materialists, in the material life, both heaven and hell are one and the same because they are material. In either place, there's no engagement in the Lord's service. Therefore, those who are engaged in that service of the Lord see no distinction between heaven and hell. It is only the materialists who prefer one or the other. So we understand that this is a material conception, right, of good and bad, of hot and cold, of beauty and of ugliness. We understand these are all material situations. For the self-realized person, he sees the dog eater. He sees everyone that's engaged in material activities. He sees the soul from within. But even though that the Mahabhagavat, the Upmadikari, he may come down to the level of a Madhyamadikari just to make distinctions. Because we understand in the material world that many people are attracted to the charms of the material world. They're attracted to attractive, beautiful things, or they're attracted to big sports cars, or someone maybe driving a big sports car, like a Corvette or something like that. So for the materialists, they're thinking, oh, this person must be very important. He drives such a nice car, right? But even if one were to drive just a beat up old car, that it gets one to the same place, to one's place of destination. So it really doesn't matter what one drives or how one dresses, but the Madhyamadikari may come onto the level of making distinctions. Because in the material world, people are judged, as they say in LA, you're not judged for who you are, but what you drive, right? So we understand in order to attract the big materialists to Krishna consciousness, we may have to show some display of opulence, right? So we build big temples, we try to present ourselves in a very orderly, very clean presentation. And we can use these things actually to attract people to Krishna consciousness. As Srila Prabhupada would once say, if I were to give classes or chant under a tree, who would come? Right? So when you have big temples or big presentations, it attracts the minds of the materialists. And so this is the duty, as here as we see, is that is to attract devotees to Krishna's lotus feet. And this is actually what brings real happiness. That we understand that everyone is basically looking for happiness, but they're just trying to find it in so many complicated ways. But here it's described that if one is dedicating his life to the constant focus on Krishna's lotus feet, then one becomes self-satisfied. He becomes Atmaram. Right? This is where the real satisfaction comes. And so here, this is given an example that it is talking about the tulsi plant, that in relation to offering it to Krishna makes it of great value. So similarly that the jivatma, the living soul, that in his conditioned form of trying to enjoy outside of Krishna, he's not that important, even though they may think they're so important. But we understand that the only real value comes is as one engages oneself in the service of Hari. So similarly, in the same way, the examples given, you can have hundreds and hundreds of zeros. It doesn't really add to anything until you add that one. It has great value. So similarly, one may be a big materialist. One may have so much money. He may be so much important in the material lenses, but it is actually of no real value until it's actually used in service of Krishna. One may say, in one sense, that someone may give so much money to charity or may do so many things to open up hospitals. It's not to say that these things aren't important or they're not good, but they only last for a certain time. They come and go. That even the biggest materialists or the richest people in the world, they'll be remembered for some time, but later on they'll be forgotten. I'm sure even during even in Hollywood during the 40s and 50s, there were particular movie stars, and maybe certain people that would be young in this room may not even hear certain people like Humphrey Bogart or all these like famous actors at one time that in their day they were the top of their game and everyone knew who they were. But if you were to bring up their names now, very few people would know. Like you mentioned someone like say George Burns. I mean, very few people. Maybe a lot of people in this room know who that is, but a lot of these people were very famous at some time, but over a period of time they're pretty much forgotten. So some may, in the same way, whatever it may be within politics or within industry and so many endeavors, that many of these people will be forgotten. And they will have lost the real purpose of life, to where they have to take birth again into a lower form of life or a higher form of life. But ultimately, if one's life is dedicated to a material pursuits, one can never find satisfaction in this life or the next life. So the real thing here is that we understand is that one should develop one's Krishna consciousness by always hearing about the pastimes of Krishna. And this is why it's so important to attend Bhagavatam class, but we should also read these pastimes. And because it's here to be very instructional, to teach us in so many things. That we understand here that the gatekeepers, Jai and Vijay, had made a mistake, and the four Kumaras had cursed them, and that their only wish was to continue their service again. So they decided to take 3 births as inimical towards Krishna, as demons, to engage in these pastimes. And so, but also it's very instructive for many of us that we have to constantly be developing this sense of humility, right? This is, the gatekeepers took a very humble position, even once they were cursed, and they understood that this was just the act of God, and that they should engage in whatever is necessary for the pleasure of God. And so it's very instructive, though, that we should always try to develop this humility. That when we develop this humility, we can see things as they are. But the problem is when we are not trying to develop humility, which is also very much there's just the opposite as actually encouraged in, say, North America, particularly in the United States, is where one should be very proud of one's nationality. I'm very proud to be an American because America is the best country in the world, right? And then certain types of people have this idea that America is great in so many ways. They say it in a very general statement, but if you were to actually ask them specific studies of what makes America so great, it wouldn't necessarily add up to their sentimental nationality, right? But it's not just within America. We find so many countries, like, Italians are thinking we're the best, we have the best food, and we're the best looking, right? Or the Greeks might say, or even, we find in different parts of the world, everyone is thinking they're so great, but yet they're not understanding where it all actually comes from. That we're only great in the relation to serving Krishna. That the greatest thing you can actually be is to be a servant, right? To be a servant of God, to be the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. That we understand, this is a very famous speech that I'm paraphrasing from Martin Luther King, said that you don't necessarily have to learn how to be an academic. You don't have to be expert in mathematics, but you just have to have a humble heart to be able to serve in any position you may be in. That Krishna is not concerned with what one's external activities are, but he's more concerned with the love and devotion in the heart. And if one is trying to develop this love and devotion within the heart, then this is how one makes devotional advancement. That one is developing one's love of God through the service of Krishna. And sometimes we may want particular services that we like, and that's good. We should engage in a particular service. But we may even do things we don't necessarily like to do. This is actually, this is devotion, because we're not concerned by our own welfare, our own pleasure. We're actually concerned about the pleasure of God. And the idea is that the more that one tries to please God, the one automatically becomes happy. But the more that one tries to find satisfaction through one's endeavors of serving oneself, the more frustrated one will be. And so, this is very instructive in many ways, is that we should constantly, how do we actually constantly engage in devotional service? It means by developing a humble heart, by constantly and being in the association of devotees, and continually chanting. That we understand that the root of suffering in this material world is ignorance, right? Ignorance of not knowing, right? If one has particular knowledge on how to do something, one can do things properly. So similarly, that if one has the knowledge in what pleases Krishna by reading Srimad Bhagawatam and hearing from Chaitanya Charitamrita and others, various Vedas, it gives us actual instructions in what pleases God. And we actually get out of this ignorance, right? That sometimes we may think that someone that may be ignorant is someone that is not very learned in particular ways. And that's one form of ignorance. But one can be very learned in many ways and still be ignorant about certain things. And the real thing is that one must come to that position of understanding one's ignorance. That we see this is sometimes the subtle idea of humility, right? That sometimes we may not even realize that we may be proud or attached to ourselves, thinking that we're so great. And that everyone around us can see something different, but we're thinking something completely different. So that's why it's always good to kind of get in touch with the reality by asking advanced spiritual practitioners what their thoughts are and where we're at. And that once we know what our ignorance may be, then we base it on knowledge and we continue to get rid of ignorance so we can see things as they are. That's the reason why we can't see Krishna. The question may come up sometimes and people say, well, if God exists, show him to me, right? And then without even thinking, this is very kind of a proud statement to say, because without even understanding that what qualification do I have to see God? Right? It's not that, there's even very important people in the world, it's not that you can just demand to see anybody that you wish just because you want to see them. No, you have to have certain qualifications. Similarly, like if you were to demand to see the president, it's just, everyone's going to pretty much laugh at you because what's your qualification? Who are you to see the president? Or any important person of a company or a business. If they may be in a superior position to you, so what is your qualification to be able to see? So in the same way, one may say that God doesn't exist, but what is your qualification to see God? Right? God doesn't take things cheaply, and that if one really wants to see God, one shows it through one's sincerity. And what's shown here is that the process of this devotional service, that one actually, when one engages in devotional service, he becomes fearless. He has no fear of anything in this material world. And one may have fear within the mind, but we all have particular fears. And that's understandable, but one doesn't let one's fear control him. He doesn't let that control him. He doesn't stop him from what he may do. He may have fear, but he continues to go on, so he actually becomes fearless in the sense of just trying to please God. And then this is ultimate, this is a byproduct of one that is Krishna conscious, right? He's engaged in devotional service, and nothing can really stop him. He can continue in any particular service it may be, whether it be heaven or hell. What I always think about is Bhakti Tirtha Swami, before he was initiated. He was in the Eastern Bloc of Europe, and he was continually going, distributing sets of Bhagavatams. And if anyone is very conscious or knows who Bhakti Tirtha Swami is, he's very, he's African American descent, and he's very dark. So in those particular areas, there's practically no African American people in those areas. So he would have really stood out like a sore thumb. But because he was so fearless in giving Krishna consciousness to the world, and he was very sincere in wanting that others take to Krishna consciousness, he risked his life going through all these, former communist countries of getting caught. And if he would have got caught, he would have undoubtedly probably been thrown in jail or even killed. But his whole mission was just to please Guru and Gauranga, and that to help the conditioned souls. So he would go to the universities by day, and he would sleep on the trains at night, and he would continue to do this for a long time. He would distribute sets and sets of Bhagavatams. Just to distribute a set of Bhagavatams to anyone is not an easy task. So you have to be a very special, very focused person to be able to do this. Oftentimes you see great devotees like Harinamananda from Switzerland. He would take these sets of books and he'd be in the parking lot. So he would give these sets of Bhagavatams to people in the parking lot, and it always amazed me that how can one person just go to a parking lot and just distribute a whole set to a person? But because they were so enlivened and they were so fearless in their attempt in Krishna consciousness, that Krishna used them as an instrument. And so we may be fearful in particular situations in Krishna consciousness, but we should continue to get past the fears that we may have, and Krishna will give us all that we need to actually serve him. So Krishna is just looking for the sincere heart of the living entity of trying to please him. And so we see here that this is fearlessness is a great quality to have, provided that one is continually in the fire of devotion. So I'm going to read a little bit about Vaitacharya, the Misisi, and then I'll read a little bit from, it's called the Sri Panchatattva, it's the 5 Features of God by Satyaraj. This is chapter 6, the glories of Sri Advaita Acharya. The truth of Advaita Acharya has been described in 2 verses. It said that the material nature has 2 features, namely the material cause and the efficient cause. The efficient causal activities are caused by Mahavishnu, and the material causal activities are caused by another form of Mahavishnu, known as Advaita. That Advaita, the superintendent of the cosmic manifestation, is described in the form of Advaitacharya to associate with Lord Chaitanya. When he addressed as a servitor of Lord Chaitanya, his glories are magnified, because unless one is invigorated by the mentality of servitorship, one cannot understand the mellows derived from devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Sri Advaitacharya, whose activities are all wonderful. By his mercy, even a foolish person described his characteristics. All glories to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all glories to Lord Nityananda, all glories to Advaitacharya, all glories to all the devotees of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In 5 verses, I have described the principle of Lord Nityananda. Then in the following 2 verses, I describe the glories of Sri Advaitacharya. Lord Advaitacharya is the incarnation of Mahavishnu, whose main function is to create the cosmic world through the actions of Maya. Because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. He is a Lord and the incarnation of the Lord's devotee. Therefore, I take shelter of him. Sri Advaitacharya is indeed directly the Supreme Person of Godhead himself. His glories is beyond conception of ordinary living beings. Mahavishnu performs all functions for the creation of the universes. Sri Advaitacharya is his direct incarnation. The Purusha creates them and maintains with his external energy. He creates innumerable universes in his pastimes. By his will, he manifests himself in unlimited forms, in which he enters each and every universe. Sri Advaitacharya is plenary part of that Purusha, and so is not different from him. Indeed, Sri Advaitacharya is not separate, but is another form of that Purusha. He, Advaitacharya, helps the pastimes of the Purusha with those material energy, and by whose will he creates innumerable universes. Being a reservoir of all auspiciousness attributes, Sri Advaitacharya is all auspicious for the world. His characteristics, activities, names are always auspicious. When Mahaprabhu took sannyas, Mother Sachi accused Advaitacharya, her guru, of initially convincing her first son, Vishvarup, to leave her and take sannyas, and now he was taking away her youngest child in the same way. For this offense to her guru, Nima asked her to touch Advaita Prabhu's lotus feet, and then, out of a true grateful spirit, Nima gave her the gift of divine love. One day, the 3 lords, Lord Nitai and Advaita, desired to dramatically perform Krishna's toll collecting sport, or Dana Lila. Advaita played Krishna, Mahaprabhu played Radha, and Nityananda played the gopis, or older governess, who accompanied them. Srivasta Kaur and the other devotees played the gopis. And Kamala Lakanta, Gurudas Pandit, and others played the cowherd boys. They dressed themselves in appropriate costumes and hired a boat on the bank of the Ganges, decorating the boat as well as the ghat with sandalwood paste, vermilion, and flower garlands. The boys took up various sticks, flutes, and bugle horns so they could really stimulate the paraphernalia that Krishna and his associates would actually have. They stopped playing on their horns when they saw Radha and her friends coming with big earthen pots on their heads. The old lady, Nitai, announced, "We are on our way to Mathura to sell curd, milk, and sweet rice." Subal replied, "Why have you come here? You must pay the tax in the place." When Krishna came forward and said, "Yes, you must pay," the gopis tried to negotiate. and they were willing to give 4 coins per person, but Krishna wanted 8. Just then, the gopi said, You're supposed to be the king's son, Krishna. Aren't you ashamed? Don't you even have enough money already? Let us pass at once. To this, Krishna replied, Well, since all the gopis have such heavenly breasts and buttocks, it will not be possible for me to take on more than one of you on my boat at a time. My boat leaks, you see. Reacting to the statement, Nitai, as the older gopi, began to scold Krishna, saying, Let us pass immediately, otherwise our curd and milk will go sour. But Krishna would not hear it. He insisted on a double fee for the overweight caused by the gopis' breasts, buttocks, and ornaments, and threatened to smash the pots on their heads with a stick if they did not pay. At this point, the 3 lords jumped into water of ecstasy and played there, while the other devotees performed kirtan on the bank. It should be said, in conclusion, that Advaita was purely efficient cause of both Mahaprabhu's appearance and disappearance. While his fervent prayers brought Mahaprabhu to this planet, a point where he had already touched upon, it was his cryptic poem saying that rice is no longer needed in the marketplace because everyone has come mad like Mahaprabhu himself, that led to Mahaprabhu's disappearance. This sonnet has concealed the meaning that bewildered the mass of devotees. Only Sri Damodar Mahaprabhu and perhaps Jagadananda Pandit, who brought the poem to Mahaprabhu from Advaitacharya, were able to fully understand it. Basically, the rice referred to Mahaprabhu himself, and since the love of God has spread sufficiently, the rice was no longer needed. Advaita was in essence saying that Mahaprabhu had fulfilled his mission, had accomplished what he had intended to achieve. Since people were now intoxicated with love of God, Mahaprabhu no longer needed to stay on the planet to play rice in the marketplace. In this way, Advaita Prabhu plays what in some ways may be considered the most important role of Mahaprabhu's pastimes. He unveils the Lord's Leela for the conditioned souls of the phenomenal world, and after accomplishing Mahaprabhu's mission of love, he winds it up and sends it back to the spiritual world. Are there any questions or comments? Yes?
I never, I don't know, this is really the best question to ask on Advaitacharya's appearance day, but I never heard of any disappearance of Advaitacharya. So did that mean he disappeared after Lord Chaitanya left the planet? He must have been very old. So
Yeah, he was, I think he was around 50 when
45.
Yeah, around that age, 45, I think.
who Mahaprabhu?
No, Advaitacharya. Yeah, he was older when Mahaprabhu was born. So
Right.
yeah, so he passed before.
Yeah, I just never heard of his passing away. Just
Yeah.
kind of curious.
Yeah. Okay, Srimad Bhagawatam class, Ki Jai.
Yeah.